Okay.
Again, thank you for your time.
Okay.
Um, back then, when you not, I guess, agreed to do this because you were forced to do this.
Right.
You
Yes.
had you had a lot of certain political feelings that prevented you from wanting to do it, but you were forced to do it.
Right.
And as you came back, obviously things changed. Not things changed in the way you felt about what happened, but there was a lot of thinking about what happened compared to what you originally thought. Is what you feel now the same as what you felt then?
You mean after we came back or
Yeah,
before?
after you came back.
After, yes, I feel the same way now. It was an amazing experience, and we made a lot of people happy who weren't happy, in these
Yeah,
authoritarian and people our age, that weren't able to, there was a kid like my age in Bucharest, a waiter or a busboy, came over to me and whispered in my ear, "If I give you my address, can you send me a Led Zeppelin album?" You know,
yeah.
and that was sad, And then I realized, well, we could just walk into a record store and buy a Led Zeppelin album.
Well, there's
So
that thing too, because I think a lot of people, whether you felt they were right at the time or not, there was that idea of when the troops came back from Vietnam, people protesting them at the airports, crying, like, how dare you do this? And did it give you a different feeling too? Because you're kind of getting that same treatment in a lot of ways. Not to say that they're the same thing, but did that same feeling kind of equivalent to you?
well, it was awful when we came back. I mean, we were shoved into this uh, press conference,
Yeah.
in LA airport, and we were just like barraged by all of these. We didn't know that there was going to be a press conference, and we got like lambasted by all of these people, from all these magazines, and they just killed us for basically doing the tour and then coming back and saying, these authoritarian governments are really terrible, and it's really wonderful to be back in America, and everybody interpreted it different, poorly actually, and
Yeah.
we got killed for it. It was like an early cancel culture kind of thing.
Did you feel that you were specifically being used as a tool, though, when you were sent over? I mean, of course, that's the kind of purpose of what they're doing. But in the same breath, do you feel there was some underpinnings of like some government plan as to like, this is how we're going to help break up, the Soviet Union, let's say?
Oh yeah, well, they needed to. They were sending over like opera stars or jazz people, but they never sent over rock and roll people. But they wanted to send over a rock and roll band, and to say that we were representing America. But they didn't just ask us to do it. It was blackmail. They
Yeah.
said you have to do it, or we're getting rid of your lead singer. And that's what the whole movie is about.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Did I know it was? I mean, I knew it was happening to the point where I protested. I didn't go to the reception that we had in the beginning. That Elliot Richardson, the Assistant Secretary of State, threw
Mhm.
for the band. I purposely didn't go to that. I gave an interview to the New York Post where I said I think that they ought to save the money and give it to the Black Panthers, which really didn't do me any good. But and do I still feel that way? Yes, I still feel that way. It was a Nixon administration. It was
Yeah.
horrible.
Well, I mean, that's the thing too, because I guess, like, I don't know if you heard about this or not. There was a podcast about how somebody, started this story that, this song "Winds of Change" by Scorpions was written by the CIA because they knew they were on this tour. The Guns N' Roses and all these metal bands that were allowed into Russia for the first time, pre Berlin Wall going down, and that that was their plan. It's like we're gonna use this to help us
It's
break up this.
amazing. It's amazing how people, how stupidity just is rampant still. When I was a kid, I used to think, wow, I can't wait to grow up and everybody will be smarter. Well, they aren't. I mean, it's just more bullshit. Is what it is, and I can't believe that people are still into that.
Yeah.
But of course, I can believe it because these are the times we live in. It's worse than ever, thanks to Trump and the
Yeah.
Republicans. It's horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too far into it, but it's that's the whole thing. Like, I've been saying it for years, and it's weird that we're saying it this, further on down the road. But back when, the internet was first really starting, it's like it was supposed to be the information age, but it's the disinformation age, really, is what we're in.
Exactly. Yeah.
But but the movie also does do a good job of illustrating who Blood, Sweat, and Tears were for people who maybe didn't know, or knew the music but didn't know the history of the band. Like I remember, like, because I was raised on stuff like Blood, Sweat, and Tears and a lot of other bands, but I also remember my father very specifically telling me, he's like, when he first heard "I'll Love You More Than You Ever Know" come on the radio, it's like, I've never heard horns in rock like that. That's like, it doesn't exist. And so to kind of go into that in the movie too, it's great to see. But even as you're doing it, since it's your songs, does it feel that way until you hear that reception from people coming out?
Does it feel what way?
Like you were being that revolutionary at the time until you heard the returns from people.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the first rehearsal we ever had at the Cafe Au Go-Go when the horns came in, when I first sang Morning Glory, for instance, and we rehearsed it. And when the horns came in, I almost stopped singing because it was just like shocking, because the horns were so different and it was so powerful. So yes, so I knew that it was pretty special.
And as you said, obviously, you knew the impact you had on a lot of these people you were playing for when you were over there behind the Iron Curtain. And just like you were saying, the story about the guy asking you to send Led Zeppelin albums and so on and so forth. But do you feel also that, not necessarily that you can be like, well, we were the cause for a lot of things 20 years down the road, but do you feel underpinnings of what you did actually have a lot to go into what ultimately finally happened as things broke apart?
That's an interesting question. Are you saying that we were responsible for
I'm not necessarily to have to be responsible, but you were like, maybe this was the real start of something and it could be traced back to it.
To start of something? What?
Well, whether it be the Berlin Wall falling in the late 80s or the actual breakup of the USSR later on in the 90s.
Did you see the film?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a great quote, or this one of the people that saw the concert, right? And he said the Czechoslovakian people were protesting. That was the student protest, and that's why we had to cancel Czechoslovakia. And he said, well, we were hoping that when we went to see this concert, that the same thing would start here, in Poland. That happened in, I think that was Poland or maybe Romania. That
I think
happened
it was Romania,
yeah. I thought that was pretty incredible. I mean, that's sort of like, wow, these people put so much importance into what we were doing, so much political importance. And it was just by virtue of us playing our music, I mean, having the freedom to create here in America and taking that back there.
And also, I mean, that's also talking about, again, while things are technically different now in a lot of ways, I'm not going to try to get too far into going to political now, because it bothers me with the whole Russia-Ukraine situation where people just don't realize, and it's before Ukraine even, whether it be Georgia or Crimea, the idea is like, Putin just wants to put the USSR back together, and that's what plain speech of it. But I don't know what people are learning in schools anymore. So is it more important that people see things like this to realize, to give them a better eye of what was really going on back then and what's possibly going to happen again if we let things kind of fall by the wayside?
Well, I think one of if you're saying that education is like boring and something like us going out and playing, puts it in a different context, the context of entertainment, and rock and roll, then fine, I mean, if that's what opens people's eyes, and opens people's ears, then great. I don't think we went there to specifically do that.
Yeah.
But we were musicians. We got caught in this thing, and we got screwed for it. So,
yeah, obviously every show you play, whether it be before this, after this, or just if you never happened, let's say, granted, when you go on for an encore, it's not like you're playing 15 songs for an encore. But as these shows that did went over so well and people were just keep pulling you out, it's like, I need to go back on stage. Like, did you end up at some time feeling like, I don't know if we even have material to play, even if they could get us back out on the stage at this point?
Well, we went on. We did that in the first night in Bucharest, but of course the second night, you know, they basically threw us off the stage and let the dogs out on the audience who was going nuts. You know, they didn't want us to do encores, and yeah.
But again, even if you had to, like, were you prepared to have, you know, like, well, you know, we know we can play this, but we didn't. We have this kind of in our back pocket. You know, were you prepared for when it did go well for it to be that?
Well, you're always prepared as a musician because you can always, you know, pull out a 12-bar blues.
Mm.
If you don't have like songs left to play anymore, there's always the blues, you know.
It's weird because I've been to plenty of shows where it's modern and they're not even playing full sets. For some reason, they play the 3 songs over and over again.
Yeah, yeah, that's you know, modern music. I mean, I'll never forget a gig we did at the University of Mississippi, and I was scared just to go down there. Right, this is like, you know, 1969, 1970, and we played the University of Mississippi, and there's like 10,000 people in the audience. You know, and it was sponsored by the student committee. So we do our set. We're going over really, really well, and the last number, it was like, okay, you know, it wasn't great. Nobody asked for an encore or anything. So we go backstage and say, oh my God, like that was really weird. You know, like they didn't want an encore. Then the student committee head comes back and says, well, you're on again in 15 minutes. I mean, we're on again. Well, it's the intermission. Intermission. We just played our whole set. So the police had to accompany us to the Holiday Inn that night. We thought we were going to get killed.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, it must just the idea, especially when you're not necessarily starting off, but even when whether you're starting off, you're just doing something the first time, just like kind of like that fear of just going, like, I don't know what to do at a certain point. Like, how do we move forward? And just happens what happens, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Does it still come as a surprise, even whether there was, you know, now or you know, here's a for instance. I remember when Beastie Boys' Ill Communication came out and they basically sample Flute Thing. And I'm sitting there, you know, with kids my age, 13, 14 years old. And, you know, they're going like, what's this? And I'm like, I'll show you what this is. I know what this is because I grew up with this. Does it feel strange when those things pop up where it's like your music is now suddenly kind of branching out into places you didn't expect it to branch out into?
In that case, yes. And now, you know, we haven't, you know, it was funny, you know, I really liked what they did to it. I just listened to it a couple of weeks ago, and I like that, you know, but it doesn't happen too often, you know.
Are there terms for you to, like, if they're like, whether it's a certain artist comes that you don't have much appreciation for, you don't think they're going to use it the right way, are you going to turn it down? Do you have certain preset ideas of what you would allow to be done and what not allowed to be done?
Well, first of all, as far as like licensing goes, once you have once you've commercially released a song, anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not a question of giving a license to anybody. Our permission. The Beastie Boys didn't need our permission to do it, you know. So, but we got royalties for it, you know. It was I think I got a lunch or a breakfast out of it, or something like that. At least a cup of coffee.
Here's this multi-platinum album we're going to put out. Here's some breakfast. Here you go. Enjoy. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. You know, it's fantastic that people are going to be able to start learning about something they may have never kind of understood, and that's kind of being brought to the public eye.
Thank you, Matthew.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.